Okay, so we are now recording, and this is our first podcast. And I have a list already set up of topics that Dan and Sol had provided, and I have a few topics as well. So what we'll do is we'll go with one of Sol's, one of Dan's, and then one of mine, and we will try to keep this to no more than an hour. That would be like kind of pushing it to our max. So if I'm losing track of time and you guys see, oh wow, we're getting close to that hour, or we went past our hour, then we'll try to cut it down from there.
Sounds good.
So I am Don with New Life Kung Fu. Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Sol can do the same.
Hi, my name is Dan. I am an artist, musician, and a layman philosopher. And I feel that life is something we are to experience, and my goal is to help people understand how to do that.
Great. And how about you, Sol?
So my name is Sol. I am a healing therapist. I am very similar to being able to help people understand themselves and awaken to who they are. And I do a lot of body talk or translation of pain in my work. So I do clinical and empathic touch therapy.
Great. Okay, so my viewers pretty much know me on the channel. I teach martial arts, and I teach Tai Chi. So for when we're up on your channels and they don't know me, that's what I like to do. I enjoy teaching others as well. So let's go ahead and pick the first topic, and I'm gonna go in right down the line as far as in the order that you sent the topics to me. So our first topic today is money types and types of investing and types of income. Example, stocks, cryptos, earning money as a, let's just call it as a slave, which would be like working for giving up your time for money. Then also like then you being self-employed, where you are selling a service or goods to create money. And then finally, where you earn money through not actually trading your time at all, whether it be through being an employee or being self-employed. So that's the highest tier of earning money, where basically your money works for you and you don't actually have to give up your time. So we'll start with you, Sol, because you picked that topic. So kind of talk a little bit about that and where you were going with picking that topic.
Well, from you and I just interacting while we were doing Tai Chi, it's just in the matter of I've been learning about money, and there are 3 different types of ways to gain money. And it's been told by many, many people who are successful with gaining money in a passive income sort of way, where no one's really being taught actually how to be the employer and actually invest their money. So I had to learn this as well, because I haven't been taught that way. So of course, I'm the type of person who does the gaining of it, like I'm earning the money. So I'm getting a paycheck. And then only recently have I started to start doing more self-employment for myself. So I've been gaining money slowly, but again, it's just the idea of no one's taught me like, hey, you need to invest. There's ideas out there of investment, but it never sounded good for me to do. And I don't know why that's a thing, but it could just be because I have no understanding of what to do with it. And this is now coming into play big time for the happenings around the world right now. And so that's why I mentioned just the types of investment and then the types of income, because we need to be self-sustaining, yes, but I would like to try and do it outside of quote unquote government. But I mean, the main reason why we even have money is to have a measurement of value. So it's kind of, instead of bartering, because how do I know my eggs are more than your milk? It's just a measurement of value, so to speak. But it's the same thing with your skill set, your service. So that's where that came in. But I would like to hear everybody else's opinion about it.
So, Dan, what do you think of this topic so far, and what is your thinking on it?
Well, I'm probably a little bit different in that I don't see money as a goal, but more of a means to an end. So my whole practice is internal abundance. So not feeling, working on not feeling desire or craving of material things to make one feel happy. So although, I mean, obviously money is necessary to sustain oneself and to live, and I don't want to disparage that. However, I find that experiencing life on its own terms is probably the greatest source of happiness, and that oftentimes when we're concerned with money beyond what we immediately need, we tend to lose sight of that, and that tends to cause lots of suffering. There's also sort of a stratification that happens, between people who have money and people who don't have money, especially in this society where everything is so dependent on status and how much you have. It tends to kind of muddy the waters on what it is to attain a sense of inner peace and happiness. But that being said, I think anything we can do to escape the life of a wage slave is probably a good thing, and anything we can do to help others not fall into that trap is probably a good thing as well. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
I think that's kind of Soul's thinking on this, because I don't think it matters so much that it's being referred to as trying to become wealthy. I think what the topic's referring to is like you had alluded to, is when we're born and brought into school and brought into society, it's ingrained in us that we are to enter into the system, so to speak.
Right.
You have to get that 9 to 5 and enslave yourself into it, and not being educated in the sense that there's a better way, not meaning like, hey, I'm trying to become rich, but just trying to sustain a comfortable living doesn't necessarily mean that I have to get put into the system. So
correct. And I think that's where we align. And so, yeah.
Is that kind of what you were meaning, Soul?
Yes. What Dan said was absolutely correct, because this would probably go into a topic, but it deals with, there are certain people who are trying to teach us the other way. But because it has been so programmed, like Don said, it's been so programmed the moment we're in school from the propaganda that we are being taught, that you're supposed to be an employee and not think about yourself in any manner of spiritual aspects, which is you're supposed to think for yourself. You're supposed to feel for yourself. It's the concept of what Dan was talking about with the spiritual gain. It's not about money being the goal or even an end goal. And it's like, I'm abundant already. I don't need to have a substance to make me abundant. So yes, I'm on par with that. It was just the idea of I'm learning about what money, why people are so insisting on making plans with money when money is really nothing. Because in my opinion, it's kind of like a transfer of, hey, I want to send love to you, but I'm going to use money to send it to you. And that's how people started to think about it. And it's like, oh, well, then I have to have quote unquote the status now because everybody loves me. And if I don't have that substance, then nobody loves me. And it's a very facade way to look at it. But that's what this whole topic being brought up.
And falling into the harmony of what we're talking about. When we get put into school and we get put into so-called the trap, is that we're all fed from the get-go that we should be after the American dream, so to speak. So the American dream would be, hey, get the big fancy house, the big car, nice car. You got to keep up with the Joneses, right?
Yeah.
So we're put into the system, and you work the system until you're, I don't know if you know this, but they actually officially put the retirement age now at 67. So it constantly creeps up. So there's this arbitrary number of retirement is 67 goes back to the programming of you get into the system and you work in the system until you're 67 years old. And then, and only then, you can start living the good life, so to speak, where if we think about it and we refocus, and even if we say, okay, we're in the system, right? But we're only going to work the system until we reach a specific goal, and not meaning like the goal is putting our money into the big house, the big car. And with your saying, Dan, is like, let's say my goal is to, be a very spiritual, enlightened person that, helps other people. How much money do you need for that? Right.
And right. Well, to be fair, that does often require some kind of money. So I think it's foolish to say you don't need money at all, or take the approach that you don't need money to be happy, when clearly so many people are suffering because they don't have money. So I think there is a balance to be found in that. And I guess my position is just that focusing on money as a tool to help rather than money, focusing on money as a solution rather than a tool. Money is a great tool if you use it wisely, and it's a horrible master if that's all you're going to follow.
Right. And this number of 67 retirement comes into play is because basically they're saying that by the time you get into the system and the time you get to the age of 67, you should have put in enough into the system so that you can receive a monthly check, and and then you can not have to work anymore. But let's say like you're comfortable with like $30,000 a year, as let's say you could say, oh, if I could have $30,000 a year, I'd be comfortable, not meaning like rich or anything like that, but
Right.
I could sustain myself and do what I need to do. If you started right from the day you start and you live this very minimal, and then all the money that you make, you start stashing it away like a squirrel, it doesn't take to the age of 67, to be able to live comfortably. Like, this is just like this illusion thing that they throw at you from the beginning. Like, oh,
Right.
work until you get very, very old, and then, you retire. But I think more and more people are starting to realize that, hey, maybe minimalism is more important when you're younger, stashing things away when you're younger, saving when you're younger, and then that money starts to work for you.
Mhm.
And by the time you're maybe 35, 40,
Yeah. Well, that is where like certain like the Buddhist mantra of releasing yourself from attachment to things comes into play, because you're not necessarily attached or to spending money. You're not attached to having things. You're not attached to accumulating things. You're able to, like you said, be more conservative fiscally and put that stuff away without spending lavishly on yourself or getting the next toy or the next gadget, the biggest car, like you said earlier. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses, but by the time you know it, then yeah, you could be comfortable.
Yeah. And so like with you, Soul, as far as like the paycheck to paycheck, if the person has an evolution of, you start with the paycheck to paycheck, you move to the self-employed bracket, and then you move to the money working and making money, then you're free from it all.
Yeah, it's ever since I can remember, I always hated the idea of people having to wait for retirement.
Mm-hmm.
How bad, when I feel their body, it's just, the whole body is just trying to tell them like, hey, I need you to stop doing this activity because it's so repetitive and it's actually harming us. But it's like, what, like, is it worth it? Is it even worth saving that money? Yes, I understand where you guys are going with it, and I agree with you about the saving and then the I know. Sorry, Don, you were asking me that question with the employment, self-employment, and moving on in that bracket. But it has been bothering me ever since, just knowing that we need, quote unquote, money for anything, when it should actually just be the idea of like the work that we do, and then the service that we do, and then the value system of that. That's where the money comes in. But nobody has that same concept in their mind, which is why I think those of us who are outside the system have to struggle, quote unquote struggle. I say struggle because we're up against a system that has been micromanaging everything to the point where, like, yes, we understand we need money. And then, but we also understand that, hey, we don't actually need it to be self-sufficient, especially when going into the self-employee part, where I'm becoming my own, quote unquote, master, my own person that can actually stimulate my value system, because then I have to create the price tag. And like with selling art and stuff, you kind of have to create a price tag, or just helping people, you have to create a price tag again. But it's that value system, and if people don't see the value, they won't pay. But I don't know, just the whole money thing just screws up everything, because it's like, is it worth living for only money? And the answer is no, because we know that it's an underlined system, that it's all about worthiness of value of self. It has nothing to do with.
Which comes back to less is more, right? So the less you value physical things, I believe the easier it is to get to the place that you want to be ultimately. So let's put a parking brake on there, and we'll maybe circle back around to it. and we'll jump over to Dan's topic number 1, which he has as brain hemisphere dualities. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So go ahead and pick us up from there, and let's hear what you had to say about picking that topic.
So the reason why I picked that topic is because there's been a lot of research done on issues of consciousness and neurology and how the brain operates. And while it's still largely a mystery, there are some things we found out that we can definitively say are so about the brain. One is that the two hemispheres offer us different perspectives on what we perceive. For instance, we talked about this a little bit, but we have a left hemisphere that is more designed to apprehend the world as it is, to grasp onto meaning, to find things as they are and manipulate them for what they are. And we have developed a right hemisphere to be able to put that into context, into a broader contextualized view of the world. And by sort of having both of those views merge, we have more of a capacity to have a fulfilled understanding of ourselves, our place in the universe. And we are very much living in a world dominated by the left hemisphere. And what I mean by that is left hemisphere is reductionist, is overtly emotional, super or hyper logical to the point where it doesn't see anything but logic. And that takes us to some very negative conclusions. And a lot of the concepts.
So the left hemisphere is, there's no gray. It's just, it is what it is. It doesn't see anything else. It's like, that's a tree. That's a tree. There is no anything other than
correct.
That. Okay.
And then so that right hemisphere, for instance, that would see, well, that is a tree. You're right, but there's also ferns in the forest. There are animals in the forest. There is the forest, and then you can see where that tree sits, and how we pay attention to that is sort of kind of shows us what part of the mind we're attending to, or attending with, rather, because how we attend to the world, what we put our attention on, forms our reality. So very much so, like how we meditate in Tai Chi or Mahayana Buddhism is very much about broadening awareness and bringing the world into being, which tends to, in my personal experience, gives us a more richer, more detailed view of life in general, whereas the people stuck right in this very left hemisphere way of life, these are the people running around with angry faces and trying to get to this, trying to get to that, and touching on earlier this constant need to be in society's hamster wheel, like, is very much so a product of left hemisphere thinking, where it's this and nothing else. Whereas, again, with the right hemisphere, it's both and. It's like, yes, it can be that, but it is also this. And the more we get in touch with these different aspects of ourselves, the more we can live a more fulfilling life. And the more our planet can reach a point where it's not eating itself. So does that make sense?
Yeah. And what do you have to think about that, Soul? I know we don't hear you.
Can't hear you.
There has been many things. Yeah, okay, good. Okay. So there has been a lot of things as to the agreement. I'm agreeing with you because, but I want to add to what you're also saying, because what I've been learning is we have a second brain and it's in our gut. And that's the part that we're supposed to be feeling with. And this is the consciousness evolution. But you also mentioned about you in your topic, it mentioned the mental part being the brain hemispheres, and then the mental stages or mental parts of people that are getting a little extra with the quote unquote network of society that is feeling like they need to be in a group of people in order to blend or not be so stuck out. Like nobody wants to be unique anymore. And I'm like, that's the point. We're supposed to be unique. So I would also agree this. I've also been understanding the left and right as well. And it's true, but it's also kind of like with the tree concept. It's like the right side is also saying it's alive. It's not just a tree. It's just not a prop.
Right.
It's alive. And then in the gut, our second brain, quote unquote, second brain is supposed to actually feel the tree as if we are a part of the tree. And then, like you mentioned, with us focusing on certain things that we focus on creates our reality. I agree with that 100% because a lot of people are focused on problems, not solutions. And because they're so focused on problems, they can't find or hear a solution at all, which then makes things warp even more because they're not allowing themselves to even have an opportunity to even have that part of them. And it's a part of themselves, but they've like numbed it out or shut it off. And that's a big thing. When I interact with people, I can actually feel parts of their body are numb. And I'm like, hey, you've ignored this part of you. And that's why your back keeps hurting. And, you know, I talk about all sorts of fun stuff there, but it deals with what you are thinking. And then your mental state, your emotion state gets stored in your body. And then you keep practicing this thought, and then it manifests in your body. And then I get to go in and be like, hey, you have a lot of pain here, and this is why. And that's exactly what you're saying because of what's happening. It's all in that left side logistics. So, and then they say it is what it is. And I'm like, no, it ain't. Because you have the ability to change. That's evolution. That's what we're supposed to do. But in my opinion, we're supposed to harmonize with, you know, like, quote unquote, the human life experiences. Does this feel good or does this not feel good? That's it. So then if it doesn't feel good, try and harmonize with it, but think around it because there's something there you don't see, or maybe you're not supposed to see it. You're supposed to feel it. And that's part of the evolution of harmonizing with it. And then you go back into, well, where did it come from? Well, where does my thoughts come from? And then it starts to make sense. And then, oh, that's amazing. And then it's so amazing. I love talking about it.
So another point, you kind of touched on something with the gut. So another major difference is the right hemisphere is the hemisphere that tends to deal with intuition. And the left hemisphere is all immediate fact. But without the intuition, we miss out on major discoveries. Most major discoveries were something intuitive, or like in a crime, a detective, oftentimes they solve the crime on a hunch. And that is very much a right hemisphere taking in the world. And there's so much data out in the world that we don't consciously have it. So it's sort of like a subconscious intake. And then that represents itself to the left hemisphere, which then can have a more complete set of facts. But it's also the right hemisphere is what understands spirit, the flow of time. So, for example, someone with right hemisphere damage, like severe right hemisphere damage, doesn't perceive time in a flow, but more as a series of static images, and they don't grasp the passage of time. So, for example, someone with right hemisphere damage might be asked to describe their hometown or the street they grew up on. And if you could sit them, they've done experiments where they'd have someone with right hemisphere damage look down their street and describe everything that they see. and they're only describing things on their right side because that left hemisphere is responsible for vision on the right. And they don't even acknowledge anything to the left. Now, after that, they'll stand on the other side of the street and they'll describe their house, like where they lived, and ignore the other side. And their mind doesn't see that there was a sequence of events. They can't put that picture together. There is no cohesion there. So whereas if you have left hemisphere damage, your perception of time, you would still perceive everything. And like, if you did have some kind of damage to your right eye, and it could only still see half, you would be able to remember that before I saw this picture, and our concept of time would fill in those gaps. And so we'd still have a full picture. So that's really fascinating. And that little thing gives us a window into how left hemisphere world operates. And so we see people stuck in immediate events out of context with the rest of the flow of time. And so I feel that is a big clue.
So real quick,
Mm-hmm.
What tips do the two of you have to help people work on these two to come into like a cohesion and a way forward?
Well, can you hear me? Making sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, good. So the thing I would do as a therapist is I would have to physically touch them to find out where they're having the most, I want to say blockages, because the mindset for me is the electrical impulses in the brain are getting misfired and, like you said, damage. So you have nerve, not just nerve damage, but you have the synapses flares are not firing correctly. So it's an electrical impulse to me. And so I would have to physically feel that to unwind it. So my technique would involve getting them out of pain. Granted, the brain doesn't really feel pain, but they can still understand that there's something weird going on and they don't know how to articulate and translate it. So I would have to go in and just kind of touch and figure it out. But electrical impulses is my number one thing. If I were to actually try and describe it to someone, is you could use a machine to even electrically measure where you're getting more of a flare and then very little flares. And then my suggestion is to realign. And I mean that in the most simplest of forms, but also the deepest of forms, because you need to reconnect the brain waves or the brain synapses flares, and then the nerve impulses, and then the connection thereof in between. And then it's the idea of sound or frequency or vibration, because that's what we're made up of anyway. So it's that electric part that we need to reconnect to and realign to. So you can use a lot of sound frequencies to help tone in and reconnect that. But if you have, like, quote unquote eye damage, that might take a little longer because the eye is a little different from the brain. But that's my opinion of what I would do. What would you do?
I think for me, it's important to understand that, like so many of the phenomena of the left brain, certainty is a phenomena of the left hemisphere. And like, I don't want to say that you have to use one or the other. Like I said, you have to use them both at the same time. And understanding that certainty is what happens when the left hemisphere gets a hold of information. And just simply understanding that certainty is a product of the most limited hemisphere of our brain can give us a window that, well, I'm certain about this, but this is also now the most limited set of facts I can have to be certain of. And there's a whole world of information I don't have and can't possibly act on without some kind of awareness, which is for me where meditation comes in on not just mindfulness meditation, but awareness meditation, being aware of the surroundings and being aware of feelings, being aware of things. And just the more we practice being aware of our environment, the more we naturally engage with that right hemisphere, because that mindfulness is the right hemisphere working. So all you have to do is just work on that. For me, it's a very simple thing. As far as health-wise, there are other, like yourself, soul people more attuned to how to go in through a physical healing rather than just a mindfulness healing.
Well, when you say awareness, you're actually articulating the senses, the tactile senses, all of our senses, to actually feel like the picture or being described as to your childhood, that picture of them describing what they see, but them being aware of what they see is what you're talking about with they need to feel the image, the feel the.
It's awareness is, it is feeling. So like it's paying attention to your body and to what your mind is doing. So like
and reconnecting and lining up that way.
Yeah. And so for example, like one practice I do is as I'm sitting in a meditative pose, I just focus on an individual, any given part of the body, and try to feel what's happening there. And then move that awareness or that attention around to different parts of the body or emotional states. And not trying to deny emotional states or accept them. Just be aware of, just feel it and let it pass.
Yeah.
In my view, awareness and mindfulness are a little bit different. Mindfulness is just knowing what's going on. And awareness is the broader context, is sort of like awareness. The way it was described to me is that awareness is like space. And mindfulness is more like the clouds in the sky. So you can be mindful of any given thing, and then you just let it pass. And that awareness is what's left afterwards. Like you're aware that there's a cloud that passed. You're aware that the sun changed positions or something like that.
Would you then call mindfulness your left hand, your left brain, and then your awareness, your right hand? Because you're thinking, knowing, knowledge, and then your awareness, feeling,
right.
More broad.
In a way, there is a correlation. I'm not exactly sure how all that fits because I'm still doing the research. So
let's pause on that for a moment, and I'm gonna actually bring up the next topic, and this topic will more than likely fall in line with what we were just talking about. And my topic is how we perceive truth and what is or is not true. And I like this topic because we're so, again, with going back to the brains, right and left brain, we're so easy to either believe something is true, or we're so easy to discount something as not true. And Sol and I had this conversation, and it's funny that you and I had this conversation too, Dan, that now let's just talk about the Bible for a moment and the apostles and some of the others who wrote books of the Bible, mainly the New Testament, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, these type of books. And they're written because they were spoke to by the Lord, and they wrote these things down, right? It's like whether God was standing right next to them and like talking to them and they were writing it down, or God spoke to them in a dream or whatever. These things were written down as truth, put into a book, and millions and millions of people around the world believe it as truth. Now, if I were to go to sleep and have a dream, and I'm given words of wisdom by God, and I wake up in the morning and I'm like, wow, that's crazy, and I actually write it down. I don't tell anybody, and then the next night the same thing happens again. It's like, boom, wow, this is crazy. I got information again 2 nights in a row. And this happens for like 2 or 3 months. Like every night I get spoken to and I write this information down. So this actually becomes like a long like ledger of information that I was given to by the Lord, and it's like a book, almost like a chapter, like a book in the Bible, right? It has multiple chapters of information, and then I go to my church and I present this as, hey, you know, God spoke to me over the past like 6 months, and I wrote this stuff down so that everybody can learn from it. Oh, this guy's loony, right? He's a kook. Like, this is not even true, right? So, like, how do we perceive truth, right? Go ahead on that, Dan.
Well, I would say perception is based on, in my experience. Our experiences set us up to believe or disbelieve certain things. And whether or not that's true or not kind of depends on the societal context in many ways. In our society, we have a very secular, Kantian society that's driven by this notion of one empirical truth that can be got at by getting to the fundamental matter of everything by reducing everything to a single point of data, which isn't how the world is built. You know, it's like I was listening to, this is a little bit off topic, but I was talking to a biologist who used to work with Jane Goodall back in the 50s. And what he was doing, he was studying monkeys, but they were studying them in cages. And so in essence, you could analyze everything about that monkey biologically. You could even dissect it, but you don't know anything about that monkey because it's not in the context of the forest. So like something like the Bible, I think 2,000 years out, a lot of it is sort of out of context now. You know, they have you have just a fundamental different understanding of the world that develops a sort of truth. But I do think like how humans perceive it, again, kind of goes to a left hemisphere intake versus sort of incorporating that with that right hemisphere. And I think we intuit the truth as much as we logic the truth. And in some ways, being too logical is a default. Like, for example, people who have schizophrenia have a hyper logical view of the world. They cannot differentiate between fantasy and reality. They see everything as fact, and they connect all those dots. So, like in today's world, we might see something like the story of the burning bush, but there's no burning bush. Bushes don't burn, and that's that. But maybe missing that, perhaps that's more of it could be a metaphor. It could be a way of getting to the truth without explicitly telling people the truth. Because one thing that the left does is, left hemisphere, is it bases everything on a threat analysis. And anything that makes us uncomfortable by the left hemisphere is perceived as a threat and discarded. If it doesn't trigger any of that, then it's welcomed in. And it's really as simple as that. So some of it is understanding that process. And then understanding that there is, in my perspective, truth is unique to each individual. I think the best way to get at the truth is see what lines up with the most amount of people. You know, like, for instance, in Buddhism, we talk a lot about alleviating suffering and the ways to do that. And, you know, our goal is to alleviate all suffering around the world, you know, whether it be a mass action or through individual acts, regardless of that human being is, which parallels like the Good Samaritan tale. And so to me, that's a fundamental truth, that you just stop to help somebody because they're suffering. So things like that to me seem to be, those are suggestive of truth rather than, oh, what, Jesus was absolutely wearing brown sandals that day. Absolutely. And no, he was wearing blue sandals. Like, well, there's no evidence for that. And you get in this big conversation that has nothing to do with reality, nothing to do with the truth. Like, yes, I'm sure he did have a certain color, but that's not what the truth of the story is about. And I don't remember, it was Jesus in that story of some other guy. I don't recall anymore. It's been a long time. But do you know what I mean?
So what do you think, Soul?
Well, my concept goes back to if I were to perceive a rainbow, and everybody sees a rainbow, we all can agree it's a rainbow. But the way I see the rainbow is completely different from how everybody else sees the rainbow, or how we perceive it or feel it or whatever. So it's very interesting, though, since talking to you, John, last time, you had upgraded your story. So I'm actually really excited now to dive in a little deeper on this, because like while you were talking, I was able to kind of understand a little bit more as to why we do what we do. Because okay, so how to explain this? Because when you're excited about seeing a rainbow, you want to share it. Like, you cannot hold it back. You just want to share everyone, because it made you feel in such a very particular way that you want to share it, because it's like love. It's unconditional. It's just like, here's more of it. And I want you to have success because I feel so successful. And that's just the understanding of that. That's how it made me feel. So when you got this dream or this message from the Lord and you decided to write it down, that's different. Because I've noticed especially when you read the Bible, there are very particular passages and words that you feel something from. That's very important, because that's, I think, why we perceive the written word versus the spoken word. Now, both have an impact. Absolutely. But it's very interesting about our types of perception on what we believe to be true. But it's so interesting because everybody wants to be right. And to a degree, we are all right. But it's my business versus your business. And that's why, but people want to make it like overcompensate with, I'm right, you're wrong. You have to be wrong because I'm right. but it's your perception of the rainbow. Like, I see a color, you see a color, but we both see a color regardless. But it's interesting with the perception of, it's just the understanding, or at least to my degree of understanding, that it's your perception of what needed to happen for you to have a click moment, to have an aha moment, to have that unconditional love will awaken you to a degree. And I need to be there to support that. And there aren't people really to do that. So if people, now I have told Don this, that people will try and talk you out of what amazement you have just felt and witnessed for yourself. They'll do that. And that's why this usually says, when you heal, don't talk about it. When you do something miraculous or a miracle happens, don't talk about it, because people are going to try and talk you out of it. And it's very interesting. But if you write it down, people will read about it and they'll feel it for themselves. That's where I think the biggest clue has been I say clue, but it's a deeper understanding of what we do, what we do. Because the word can be messed up, but when it's written, you actually feel it. And I don't know, like the whole monkey thing, like you can dissect it as much as you want, but it does not change how you feel about it. So John can be proclaiming it, but if he actually publishes that book, that's different. So I think that's the main thing, that perception of truth. But like, I'm here to help you understand that what you had was legit, and don't let anybody else talk you out of it, because that's your business. And it was meant for you, not for anybody else, right? Because nobody else got it.
Now we are getting close to an hour. Now the hour, obviously for this video, not so much, because we had a little hiccup there, but I want to try to tie these three things together, and it's interesting because for everyone who's watching that doesn't know, the three of us practice Tai Chi, and the thing, a big thing that we're after in Tai Chi, well, actually two things, is Song and Ting. So as a Tai Chi philosopher, so to speak, of Song, is we're trying to release. So whether we're talking about materialism, to have more money, to have more things, we need to release and song our need for materialism, to try to get to this higher place that we're trying to get to at a quicker rate, because being tied and tied into some thing that we were put into since we started school, and tie into finances and tie into this and tie into that. The only way we can take that next step is to release our thought process that that's the only way, right? And then tying into the brain hemispheres, right? If we're so right-brained or we're so left-brained, we have to song and try to come in to understanding with both sides, right? And then as far as now, the funny thing is with talking about truth, I didn't even think of this when I even brought this topic up. Is being able to song your disbelief that something can or cannot be true, because just because you didn't experience it or see it doesn't mean that it's not true, because we're so quick to believe that there's no way that could happen, or there's no way that's true because I didn't see it, or I didn't hear it, or I didn't feel it, right? It's all about me, right? To the fact that I need to song that and release myself of my own ignorance to believe that, hey, there is a possibility that what that person's experiencing or saying or doing is truth. What do you think of that in closing?
Yep.
That reminds me of the story about the blind men and the elephant, where like three men in blindfolds are asked to describe what they feel, and one's feeling something long and bendy, another one's feeling something furry, another one is feeling like a trunk or like a tree or something, and they're all describing something different. But when they take the blindfolds off, they're all describing the same thing, but just from a different angle. They're all describing the same elephant, but one is like from different angles, and they're all right.
Yep.
Yeah. That's interesting. Very interesting. So you guys have any closing remarks? Any circling back to any one of these topics?
Oh, I'm sure we can keep talking, but I'm good.
Well, what could be a takeaway for our viewers? What could be your quick 2-minute takeaway from anyone watching the video? You go ahead and you go first. So since you're
perception of truth, because it's don't always take into account that someone else is speaking always a truth. It might be their truth to a degree, but that's up to you, because you are the one that matters. It's their business and your business. So it's just that perception of try and take care of yourself, but listen. But you don't have to believe in everything, but taking into a quote unquote awareness, and then the mindset of trying to figure it out for yourself. That's part of the experience and having fun in this lifetime, in my opinion.
And you, Dan?
I think more people should engage with practicing awareness of who they are and where they are. It kind of ties into soul, what she said. Just being aware of what we're feeling without passing judgment on it, and not being attached to any particular state of being is a really good way to kind of put the brakes on certainty, so that certainty doesn't become your fundamental guiding light, because we can never be absolutely certain of anything. There's always information we can't possibly have. There's more we don't know than we do know. And so just being aware of that.
Amen.
I will close with saying that our practice of releasing the ego mind, because with an ego mind, you close yourself off to self-improvement and discovery. Yeah, I think that should be a
It all ties together really nicely.
Yep. I'm clapping. So yay. Amen.
Okay. All right. So for the video, thanks so much for watching, everybody. And stay tuned for our next one. We're going to try to do these podcasts maybe at least 1 or 2 a month. So thanks for watching. Everybody stay safe. Say bye.
Bye. Peace out.